All right, welcome. Let's go ahead and get started today with our discussion on emails, memos, text messages, and social media communications. We will go over some basics of emails, basics of memos. We have a memo assignment that is going to be due, I think, 2 weeks from tonight. We'll talk about how I want you to approach that, in addition to just some best practices discussions with both emails and memos. We'll have a little discussion about text and social media messaging and how some of the communication skills we've learned in this class can help us with those mediums. And lastly, we will discuss the Dell case and think about how that company effectively used social media in a thriving business environment. So, we're going to go ahead and start with emails and memos. Now, I like to frame this as a best practices discussion on emails. I don't want to give anyone the impression that you don't know how to send an email. But there are a variety of mistakes that are common with emails, and those kind of mistakes can hurt your credibility, and they're easily corrected from a communication standpoint. So, with that disclaimer, this may sound a little basic as I go through each part of an email, but I want to hear that type of discussion about how we can effectively use emails. So, I've got a sample email for us. We've got the to line, which we're going to talk about, the CC line, we'll talk about discussion. We'll talk about salutation, and we'll talk very briefly about some best practice with signatures. So, as you know, at the top we've got the to line, where you're sending an email to someone, and we've got a CC line, where you're carbon copying folks. Can someone explain the difference between those two for us, just so we're on the same page? David.
The to is who you're addressing the email to. The CC is anyone else who is pertinent to the email.
Excellent. All right. Have you received or perhaps sent mistakenly an email where the wrong person was in the to field or the wrong person was in the CC field? Has anyone had that experience, either receiving an email like that or accidentally sending an email? Someone want to share why that's potentially a bad thing? Like, it's just an email, right? I CC you, I to you, it's whatever. It's just like an email. You all have the information. No big deal, right? When might it be a bigger deal? What sort of message does it send? You, the sender of this email, are not distinguishing between the people that this email is to, and as David said, the email that this is just pertinent to. What sort of message does it send about your project management skills, your organization skills, your detail skills? Not good messages, maybe? Help me out here, I'm dying up here. It sends not good messages about your project management skills. It says that you don't necessarily know who is involved in this subject and who is just periphery to this subject. And those sort of nuances are important to people who are very busy, opening up several emails, and want to put confidence in you as an MBA student, an MBA, post-MBA hire who is running an important project, and you want to be able to distinguish those nuances. All right, so to and carbon copy. The other thing I like to mention, suppose you are emailing a variety of folks that are directly involved in this project, and you want to put them all in the to section, maybe 5 or 10 folks. Does anyone have any thoughts about the order in which you may put those folks? Would you do it alphabetical? Would you do it random? What sort of order might you put folks in when you send them an email? David?
I mean, usually if there's a hierarchy in the department or company, you'd want to go from highest to lowest.
Okay, so highest to lowest. Does that surprise anyone? Has anyone never even thought of that, never even heard of that before? Has everyone thought of that? Everyone's heard of that before?
I mean, it makes sense. It's just like.
Does anyone think, oh, that's just silly? No one would care? No one would care? Yeah, that's fine.
No, I'm saying they do care.
Yeah, they do care. People can get offended by an email. People can get offended, you disrespect their 10 years at this company by putting some intern before them. It also might show that you don't really understand who the important decision makers on this project are. by mixing up the person who's at the lower rank than them. I think it's something to be aware of. You may not use that technique all the time, but it's something I like to point out. It's a good indication of communication skills and sometimes can get you in trouble if you don't use it. All right, let's talk about this salutation. Here we've got Dear Hiring Manager. Does anyone have any preference of what they like? Do you like Dear Hiring Manager? Do you like To? Do you like Yo? Do you like, what do you like in terms of that salutation?
I prefer two.
To? Okay, why not Dear?
It sounds like it's a little bit too personal, like not for the workplace.
Yeah, Dear is more formal. I'd say it's more of a carryover from when we wrote letters. It's a formal letter. And emails have developed a little bit of a more casual style. Not quite Yo, but To, or maybe just the person's name. To Hiring Manager if you have a title, or Chris, Nancy, Jill. Just the person's name is generally a good safe bet. All right. So we're going to move on from this. I sometimes have students do an email assignment, but I'm not going to have you do that. So we've had a decent discussion about some best practices emails. Unless anyone wants to interject any more about email discussion, you got a funny email that really rubbed you the wrong way, you got a question about how you might approach a certain email. Anyone have any questions like that? Fair enough. Let's move on to memos. Memos, in general, are going to be more formal than emails. There's another thing about memos we should all keep in mind, is that they're typically less interactive. When you send someone a memo, you don't expect a response right away. When you send someone an email, it could be a quick response, and it could be very personal. But memos just have a slightly more formal feel, and they're not necessarily meant to be interactive. You will do a memo assignment for this class, which I think is due in a couple of weeks, and that memo is something that should stand on its own. All right, you should not need someone to respond back to you to get all the questions. It just should have this formal memo. This stands on its own, and it's for a general audience, including everyone who I am writing to. This is a proposed format. If you want to look up a format for memos and do it a little differently than that, that's fine. Typically, you might have the date at the top, the person you're writing to, the CC, you'll still have the CC, from you, subject, and we'll talk about good subject lines in a minute. And then you will just start your memo without any salutation, without dear, without to, because it has a little bit more of that formal tradition. And you will not sign it at the bottom either, because you've already said who it's from at the top of this memo. Any questions just about the structure of typical memos? So this is a structure, and we mentioned that this is a little more formal, a little bit less interactive than an email. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how I would suggest you approach writing emails and memos, and how you can use what we'll talk about now to complete your assignment for the memo work. Whenever I suggest a strategy for writing emails and memos, I always base them on a business need. You need to write something for some sort of business need. You need to help people know information, you need to help people do something, or you need to get people to feel something. You want them to understand, you want them to sympathize with you, you want them to support your plan. And I always like to frame everything we do in this class as a business need. I don't teach you any touchy-feely communication type stuff just because it's touchy-feely communication. It's touchy-feely communication because you have a significant business need. These first two, if you need your audience to know something or need your audience to do something, there's a lot we could talk about, but we won't. We'll just skip over this stuff. And I think our time is best spent in this third one. If you need your audience to feel something, what sort of nuanced communication techniques can you use to get your audience to sympathize with you? Suppose you're writing a bad news memo or a bad news email. How can you make them feel a little bit better about this situation? Or how can you entice them over to your view? What are some of the techniques you all have used in the past, or you might suggest you use to write an email or a memo if you want your audience to feel a certain way? Feel free to look at the slides and suggest those ideas as your own. I don't have a problem with that. How are you going to convince your audience to feel a certain way?
People always appreciate the truth
Yeah, tell them the
instead of a
truth.
little fib here and there.
Yeah, they're gonna, yeah, would you say avoid a fib here and there?
Yeah.
Avoid a fib here and there?
Yeah.
Yeah, avoid a fib here and there. So the truth is good. People are gonna trust you, people are gonna sympathize with you if you think you're being honest. Now it's more obvious if we look at it the other way. If you're dishonest, if they see something that's just not accurate, and it's an emotional subject that contains a lot of bad news, that can really rub your audience the wrong way. Be truthful. Fantastic. What else?
Question?
Yes?
Ask a question.
Ask a
Asking a question.
question. Yeah, okay, so ask a question. Tell me more about that, okay? What kind of question and how's that gonna work? Kind of engage, somebody help us out here. Just gonna, I know we talked about when you give a verbal presentation, it engages your audience a little bit. Ask a question, maybe you could ask a question like, what would you do if you had to lay off half the company? And have that question, all right, maybe gets them thinking from your point of view. All right, that's a good suggestion. Anything else? What do we got here? All right, audience sensitive. Show understanding. Say, I understand that this is a tough situation. We have to lay everyone off. Illustrate consideration. We thought carefully about your resume with all the other job applicants. We didn't just toss it to the side. Explain rationale. You might explain your process of rejecting this person for a job. You might say, this is the process we went through. It was a thorough process. And maybe by the end of that letter or memo, you could have your audience think, gosh, I would have done the same thing if I were in their shoes. Be truthful, as Venetia pointed out. Offer alternatives. It's a good way to get people to feel the way you want them to feel. Say, I'm sorry, this is maybe disappointing. We don't have this option available for you, but we have this option and this option and this option available for you coming up next month. Buffers. What are buffers? Anyone heard of buffers before? Somebody, I've heard it called sandwich bad news. Like if you're going to give someone bad news, put it in a sandwich. I've heard of a little more colorful adjective of that same thing. Buffer is you start with a positive, then you tell them the bad news, and you end with a negative, and you end with a positive. Say, hey, I think you're overall doing a great job at this company. But we had this problem with yada yada yada, blah 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 blah. You can't talk to people like that, especially if they're important customers, blah blah blah. And you end with, and I think you're doing a good job motivating your team as well. There are pros and cons to this. What might be the con? The reason you want to use this carefully, or not use it? Con, what could be a con? I found my Kleenex, I thought I was going to have to use a random piece on the floor. What might be a reason you wouldn't want to use the buffer strategy? Yes, Dave?
So they might not actually get the point of what you're trying to say.
Yes, that could be dangerous.
Yeah.
So they may think your whole discussion was about you telling them they're doing a great job in motivating their team. That's a big one. What's the other one? There's one more that is thought to be particularly dangerous to this type of strategy. might sound insincere, right? Like the two nice things you say, the one at the beginning and the one at the end, you're just setting them up for the bad thing you're trying to say. So when they hear you say, oh, your hair looks great today, or you're doing a great job overall, they're just waiting for the bad news and think you're just lying to them about the first part. So you want to use this buffer strategy very carefully. And only use it if you can be sincere about the two good things on either side. If it's not sincere, if it's not true, be careful. Indirect rejection is the next strategy. You might say, instead of no, you cannot have next week off, you could say, unfortunately, we need at least a month notice before time off is approved. Little less in their face rejection. Adjust audience emphasis. This is an effective technique. And how this works is if you have good news, I recommend a lot of use of the word you. Or if I'm going to say, Danilza, you have done a great job. You got this award. You did this, you did this. That's for good news. If you have bad news to deliver, de-emphasize the use of the word you. You could say, unfortunately, this project wasn't completed on time. Unfortunately, it came in over budget. Unfortunately, we didn't get all the results we wanted. Instead of saying, you were late, you came in over budget, you didn't get the job done. Bad news with excessive use of the word you can be a little blatant. May not get your audience feeling the way you want them to feel if they feel assaulted with the word you constantly thrown at in a negative term. Does that make sense? So adjust audience emphasis. Heavy use of the word you if you're giving good news, not so much if you're giving bad news. Alright, so these are some techniques I suggest you think about using for the memo assignment. Let's talk about subject lines. We have just a moment to capture our audience's attention with a good subject line, to try to get them to read our memo, to try to get them to read our email. The metric I suggest is you want to make the subject line relevant to your audience, but as concise as possible. So relevant, so they open it, they realize it's important to them. The longer it is, the bigger chance you have of losing their attention. Relevant but concise. Balance those two things as best you can. In our subject line, do we want the topic of our email, or do we want the conclusion of our email? What do you think? And we talk a lot about topic and conclusion in this class. When we give presentations and the writing strategy I've shown. What do you think? Do we want the topic of our email in the subject line, or the conclusion in the subject line?
Topic.
Topic? We've got one vote for topic. You all like it? I like topic. Alright, topic frames it for us. Every once in a while there might be a need to put the conclusion if it's a very, very simple, straightforward thing. I think the topic is the best way. Your audience is used to receiving information in that context. Topic is generally the way to go. If we have bad news that we're going to deliver in this email or memo, it is best to frame it carefully. Surprising bad news can be received especially negatively. So if it's an email with bad news and you just surprise someone with it, the reaction can be worse than if you frame it by putting the topic in your subject line and then explain this unfortunate situation in the body of your email or memo. Let's look at some examples. Think about how this works with framing. Alright, how do you like that subject line? How would you like to get that subject line in your email inbox? No? That's okay. You didn't get the joke. Surprising bad news. Just hits you. Alright, how about interview follow-up?
Yeah.
That might be better. Okay. How about this? If you saw this in your inbox, notes. You like that as a subject line? No, it's too vague. Well, what if you just worked with your team from your finance class at Mercy College, and this person knew you would know exactly what they were talking about?
Yeah,
Yes?
depends on the situation.
Depends. Well, what if you try to look at it 2 weeks later and you're looking for notes? You don't really know, this is vague. You remembered at the time, but you can't remember it later. How about finance committee notes? 9/21/15? Probably a better example. This could be an example of someone not realizing that it was important to frame for their audience and just being a little bit too casual with their use of subject lines. How about this one? Elevator out of service January 12th and 13th.
Yes.
You like it? Now this is for lack of a better word, a conclusion. It's not a topic, it's the conclusion right in the subject line. But do we like it?
That one's a good one because it's something small and concise.
Yeah, something small and concise. I feel like this is a good example of when it would be okay to violate the topic or conclusion in the subject of an email. How about this one?
No.
Okay, well it's kind of the same as this, right?
No
Now,
hot water in January?
no hot water in January, alright? This is bad news, potentially.
We gotta talk about this.
Alright, I have to explain why we're doing important renovations that are gonna be beneficial overall. And explain what your alternative options are, like heating up water on your stove. Great. Any questions about that? Subject line examples? Let's talk about this corporate change memo. You'll be graded on your subject line, your ability to accomplish the business need with this memo, and your need to be sensitive to your audience. Let me go ahead and read over that assignment briefly with you. See if you have any questions about how you want to approach this. Okay, I'll just go ahead and read it. You can follow along or just listen with whatever's comfortable for you. So this corporate change memo. You are a senior manager for Bank First, a large retail-based bank based in New York City. Your company, Bank First, has just acquired Minia Bank, a medium-sized bank headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Minia Bank has 20 retail branches. It has 20 retail branches around Minneapolis and almost 800 employees. The acquisition was very important for your company, Bank First, because Bank First wants to gain a foothold in the Midwest in order to diversify its customer base. You will be in charge of transitioning Minia Bank into fully incorporated branches of Bank First. It is of paramount importance that this transition goes smoothly in the eyes of Minneapolis customers, because if the customer base shrinks as a result of the change, the Bank First investors will have serious doubts about the company's ability to expand. During this transition, you know that roughly 20% of the frontline tellers, loan officers, and other customer service personnel will lose their jobs. Additionally, roughly 80% of the senior managers and the staff at headquarters will lose their jobs. Your task is to write a memo to all Minia Bank employees that will calm the employees and help the transition go smoothly. Because you want to gain the trust of the employees who will remain, you want to be as honest as possible during this memo. So, you are Bank First. You've just acquired Minia Bank in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and you're going to have to lay off roughly 20% of the frontline bank tellers, 80% of the senior managers. But in your attempt to do that, you need to make sure this transition goes as smoothly as possible and that the customer base does not shrink, and also you maintain the confidence of the people who will remain. So how are you going to do this? What might you do just in general? If you would like, you can reference some of the techniques we just talked about. We'll spend a couple minutes thinking about how you can approach this and make sure you feel comfortable getting started on it.
I feel like being truthful and applying a buffer would be a
Okay?
very good way to go.
Okay.
It's heavy stuff.
You all are great, I love you so much, but most of you are gonna be fired. And by the way, free lunch on Thursdays. Okay, buffer, what do you all think about a buffer in this situation?
It's not needed.
Okay, something might be needed. Before you walked in, Orlando, we talked about a buffer sometimes being insincere. Like, we know you're getting to some really bad news, and so this thing you're saying first, which is supposedly good news, is just to set me up, so I feel like you're being insincere. And I feel like with potentially emotional bad news like this, buffer could be dangerous. But if you use it carefully, if you think it fits with your plan, feel free to take some dramatic liberty in terms of how this is going to work and what sort of resources you might have and what sort of HR options you'd like to offer the people who are going to be laid off. You might want to think through that and think, okay, put these things out in terms of available resources. And if those work into a buffer that's constructed effectively, you may use it. Any other ideas?
I mean, can you just be honest, because I think it's commonly known that if your company's gonna be required, there is definitely layoffs. And
Yeah.
everyone knows that. But then the question is how, well, that's not important in the memo, but it's how are you going to decide who's more valuable enough to stay versus who has to go and, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, so that's an important question, being honest, and that's feedback I'll give students a lot of the time, that they have an opportunity with this memo to provide some clarity about what's going to happen next. And I would often encourage you to do that in this memo. Provide clarity so there's not this mass confusion and mass anxiety. Even though it might be disappointing, clarity can sometimes be good. Now, I don't always give that feedback, sometimes students frame it a different way and I say, oh, you framed it in such a way that you didn't really need to say exactly what was going to happen with HR or what was going to happen in the next steps. But I'll often give students feedback. You're going to have 10 people in your office in the next 5 minutes because you didn't provide clarity with this. We mentioned earlier that this memo is something that should stand on its own. It's not something where you're going to need a response back and forth. You can't do a ping pong email with this memo. It's just something that, boom, it's a document. People can look at it, realize what's going on, forward it to someone else who will have an understanding of, just, it will be able to stand on its own. I think that's the best way I can say it. Other thoughts? Other questions? Feel like you have a good sense of how to approach this assignment? Maxine?
Another question.
Yeah.
Do we have to just stick to what's here? I mean, is there any options that we're offering?
Yeah, like I said, you feel free to take some dramatic license in terms of the options that you're offering. This is what HR can do for you, will do for you. I guess don't say, everyone who gets laid off gets $1 million in cash. I'm gonna say that's a little ridiculous. But something that seems reasonable to you, and alternatives are a good thing to offer. Any other thoughts, questions? All right, well, let's go ahead and move on. We've got a little section on text messages and social media, and then we'll take a quick break, and then we'll talk about the Dell case. All right. Text messaging, social media posts and messaging. Now, this is fairly new to my communication content. I thought it was important. I talk a little bit about text messages, a little bit about social media because it's so common these days, and also because there's so many challenges we face with these types of communications. I would venture to say that text messages are a more common source of aggravation. If you get something wrong, if you say something that's not sensitive, more common source of aggravation than are traditional emails, or perhaps our traditional conversations. So I want to think a little bit about how we can use the skills in this class to compose those types of messages effectively. Now, when I thought about how I can approach this subject, I found myself looking at a traditional communication model. Something like this, where we've got the sender, we've got the receiver, we've got just a traditional explanation of how communications could be taught. And I think this particular model is at least 50 years old, maybe much older than that. And I honestly never thought I would be using this type of model to explain communications or teach communications, but I just found that this was an effective way to do it. If something's going wrong with an email message or a social media message, we can break it down. We can say, well, what's wrong here? Is the sender wrong? Is the sender encoding the message in an improper way? Is the medium wrong? All right, is there noise that's interfering? Is the receiver decoding the message in a way that the sender did not intend it to be decoded? And then the feedback message, same thing. Right, how is the receiver encoding their response? Are they using the right medium to respond? And how is the sender decoding this response? So, in spite of my desire to think of myself as a more cutting-edge communications professor, I'm using an extremely old model to look at text messages and social media. But I think it's going to be valuable. So we have some challenges when we send text messages, we send social media messages, when we send any message that is not in person. All right, we have some advantages as well. Numerous advantages about sending a text message, even sending a letter, making a phone call. But it's just become exacerbated because we send so many electronic messages and we do social media so often and so many text messages. But there are so many advantages to any not in-person communication, numerous. But there are some disadvantages to any type of communication that is not in person. What are some of the disadvantages and some of the ways that communication may go awry? What do we not have in our communication arsenal to be clear when we send someone a text message? Or we send someone
Expression.
Yeah, yeah.
Expression.
verbal expression, all right? You can't use the eye contact and the body language stuff that we went over in class 2. And you can't read that in the other person. Lack of nonverbal cues, lack of situational awareness. Your situation when you send that message may be a different understanding than the person who receives that message. Coding problems. All right, we'll talk about coding problems. I guess I rushed over this graph because I just spent so much time telling you about how I didn't want to use it, but let me back up a minute. All right, so we've got a sender who encodes a message somehow. They may use an acronym, they may use slang, they may use a variety of things to encode that. And the receiver may have a different interpretation of that slang, that acronym, that use of humor. And there could be problems with that, which we'll talk about. Response delay, or another disadvantage. So, as we've thought about, there are advantages and disadvantages to this not in-person communication, and those disadvantages can lead to some ineffective communication events. What I like to propose at this point is I think this whole idea of an inappropriate message is really based on problems associated with the sender, the choice of medium, strategy for encoding or decoding that message, and the context associated with that message. So what I want to suggest is there really isn't some universal inappropriate message. If you have something to say, if you have a message to deliver, it's okay to deliver that message. Where someone might say your message is inappropriate is because you get one of those things wrong in their eyes. So this inappropriate message, we might say, is perhaps because you chose in your receiver's eyes, an inappropriate medium, an inappropriate sender. Why is this 25-year-old kid sitting in front of me and firing me? There should be someone else here to do this. It's bad news, but the sender is inappropriate in my mind. Inappropriate coding, use of slang, use of humor. Inappropriate context. So, didn't you understand we're here at a funeral? You should not be explaining this message in this context. Or confusing noise. We don't get the message effectively. And that can happen with some of the technical problems we might have with our media. So, what do you all think about this? Do you think there is a truly inappropriate message? Or do you agree with me and think that anytime you say there's an inappropriate message, it's probably because one of these things is defined as inappropriate? We like that? We like this theory? Alright, so what I'm going to do now is think about how all this stuff can get even more inappropriate in a way when we use faster social media communications. Let's talk about some of the coding problems that can occur. Alright, we talked about how I'm going to code my message. Am I going to use humor? Am I going to use acronyms? Am I going to use, what do you call them? If I say LOL rather than laugh out loud, what do we call that? An abbreviation? Alright, we could have problems such as a coding difference. I code things one way, you code them another way. I could make a mistake. Alright, instead of saying, instead of saying I like you, I could say, make a mistake on the voice command, something else you, which is not I like you. Coding over confidence. Now this is the idea that when we send a message and we decide how we want to frame it, how we want to say it, which is just a simpler way of saying how we want to code it, we tend to be confident that we've said it clearly. When we send a message, we tend to think, alright, my message was clear. Because when you send that message, you have an understanding of the context, you have an understanding of your intentions. I know what I meant when I sent that message. I did not mean I want you to all quit. I just meant I want you all to step it up. So that's what I meant, and it was clear. So it's clear in your mind. It's also often clear in the receiver's mind. The audience who reads that message will say, I clearly understand what you mean by this message. And those may be two different things. But there's an overconfidence problem with both people thinking that the message is clear. So in terms of difference, you may have different language, different medium evaluation. One person may think Facebook is an appropriate way to send a message. Another person may think, well, Facebook is not appropriate for this type of message. Different assessments of the context, different assessment of whether the other party can take a joke or the other party likes this type of communication. Coding mistake, just coding errors. And then the coding over confidence. We talked about the subjective sender clarity. So I'm the sender of this message. Subjectively, I think my message is clear. Similarly, the receiver subjectively thinks their interpretation of the message is clear. And with coding over confidence, there's this phenomena we'll talk about briefly called signal amplification bias. That means the following. The tendency to overestimate how much one's behavior conveys internal states. So I think my behavior clearly conveys how I'm feeling about you, clearly conveys how I'm feeling about a situation, clearly conveys what I want you to do. And this research that these folks have done say that this is typically overestimated. Okay, you may send me a text message, I may wait a couple days and send you a text message back and say, okay, maybe we can hang out sometime. So I waited a couple days, I said, maybe we can hang out sometime. I think that's clear, right? You know, I'm not that interested. Right? Right? But the person who receives that says, oh yeah, well, you know, she was just busy. Alright, and maybe we can hang out sometime. So, I get you. I feel you. We tend to overestimate how clear our behavior is. Signal amplification bias. We'll talk about a study that was done about this overconfidence, subjective overconfidence. This was a study that happened in 2010. What happened, let me go through this. Okay, these folks put together some students and told them to communicate a certain message over email. All right, so I had a bunch of students, they said, here's a message I want you to type an email about, send it to someone. For some of those statements, the students were told to use a sarcastic tone. All right, so I may have you all in a room, I say, all right, I want you to send an email and say you really liked having lunch with that person. I want you all to be sarcastic, and I want you all to be sincere. Okay? Now, the recipients correctly assessed the sarcastic tone 56% of the time. Remember, you all were sarcastic, you all were sincere, and then the recipients, we asked them, was this person being sarcastic or was this person being sincere? And they were right about it 56% of the time. All right, what does that mean to you, first of all? When they guessed correctly 56% of the time. Are they estimated correctly?
About half, a little more than that?
About half, which is the same as what?
1 out of 2 people?
Yeah, but it's the same as guessing, right? Just by guessing, you would get you get right 50% of the time. So these researchers who did this study said, well, they only got it right 56% of the time. Now here's the rub. The senders anticipated an accuracy rate of 78%. So you all sending this message saying, yeah, I had a great time at lunch, you said, oh, or actually 8 out of 10 of you said, the receiver is going to understand my meaning. They're going to know whether or not I'm being sarcastic. 2 of you said, the receiver's maybe not going to know. So 8 out of 10 said, my tone is clear. And then the accuracy rate was the same as guessing. Does that make sense? Also problematic was the recipients assessed their accuracy rate at 90%. So the people received that and asked them, was that sarcastic? Was that not sarcastic? They say, all right, that was sarcastic. 90% of them said, yes, I'm sure that was sarcastic. 10% said, oh, I don't really know. Pretty high overconfidence for something that was just the same as guessing. All right, what else do I have here? Got some coding, medium, context, problem examples. So these are examples of things I think we might be tempted to call inappropriate messages. But what I want us to do is think about why are they inappropriate, and is it because there's a coding problem, choice of medium problem, context problem, or perhaps something else? What do I got here? Let's take a look at this. All right, so this is a text message. It's from someone in your phone called boss. The boss sends you this message saying, someone at the conference just said that our company might get bought out by Cybex. What do you think? You say, I'm not sure what to think. Should we touch base with legal or start a combination analysis? Your boss says, maybe not all that, but gives us something to think about. I have to get back to the conference. They're moving us to a different room. Talk soon. Alright, what sort of problems might happen as a result of this text exchange?
You might have that person freak out.
Yes. Alright. This person who's receiving this might freak out. Might start some sort of combination analysis, might be touching base with legal. Now that could be what the boss intended, right? Maybe the boss wanted you to do that. Anyone want to make an argument that no, the boss didn't want you to do that?
I mean,
Alright, make the argument for us, Letitia. The boss didn't want you to freak out like that.
Well, he said maybe not.
Maybe not all that. What does maybe mean?
he just seems so nonchalant about
It
it.
gives us something to think about.
Okay. Nonchalant, he says think about.
He always seems stressed about it, like it's not bothering him.
The boss?
Yeah.
It's not, yeah, okay, the boss seems like it's not bothering the boss. Does anyone make the argument that, yeah, maybe it is bothering the boss? Or why it might be interpreted that this is bothering the boss? What does the text message in and of itself imply? Just by sending a text message, what does that imply?
Urgency?
Urgency is one thing that it could imply. There's something else it could imply.
Relationship.
Relationship. So it could imply urgency or it could imply relationship. Perhaps casual relationship. I'm casual, informal enough with you that I can send you a text message, but it also might mean urgency. And I think that's the rub. That's the point I like to make with this one. You don't know which of those two things this medium implies. Is it urgency or is it casual relationship? All right, let's move on to another one. Oh, I love this one. All right, this is from Mom. Mom says, your great aunt just passed away. LOL. Why is that funny? That's not funny, David. What do you mean? Mom, LOL means laughing. Oh my goodness, I sent that to everyone. I thought it meant lots of love. I have to call everyone back. Oh God. Alright, so what's the problem here in terms of our communication flow chart?
Coding difference.
Coding.
Coding difference, alright? Mom doesn't know what LOL means. You do. Alright, I feel like I've gotten a few of those lately. Someone told me they were at a yoga class in FiDi. Does anyone know where FiDi is? I'm asked my friend who's lived in New York his entire life, what is FiDi? Does she mean financial district? I guess she means financial district, I don't know.
Did you ever find out what it meant?
I found out it meant financial district, yes. Yes, that was it. Alright, and this one is my favorite. Alright, this is a text message from Sarah. Sarah says, hey. You say, hey, we need to talk. Yeah? Look, our relationship is like doing push-ups on your knees. It's just not working out. Oh my God, did you just break up with me? Look, our relationship is like doing push-ups on your knees. It's just not working out.
Yeah.
I love that one. So this person is breaking up with Sarah, and breaking up with Sarah by using a pun. A pun. Do you believe that? It's not a metaphor, it's a pun. It's a play on the word not working out. Alright. Yes.
But breaking up being text is inappropriate as well.
I like that assessment. So the medium is inappropriate. So this person could say the medium is inappropriate. Alright, and this person might be someone you see because you're in the same alumni club. So for the next 10 years, Sarah and all her friends just hate you. Alright, that could be a problem because you chose this medium. Or because you chose a pun. I mean, it's funny, yes. But you chose a pun. You chose to code it as a pun.
Obviously, she didn't get it since she's acting like
Maybe.
she's like, wait.
Oh my God. Alright, what else do I have here? Okay, this is a Twitter example. This happened a couple of years ago. You may have remembered it. The NYPD tried to do this public relations type of thing, and they saw that Twitter is the rage. So let's jump on this Twitter bandwagon, and let's create a @NYPD. Yeah, hashtag #MyNYPD. Yeah, they said, all right, let's start a hashtag #MyNYPD. And let's give people to send pictures of good interactions with police officers, and we'll create this rage of hashtag #MyNYPD. You see where this is going? Does anyone remember what happened a couple years ago? They put all bad pictures. Do you remember it, Letitia? Yeah, they put all bad pictures. They said, hey. Is this the one your public relations people requested? Hashtag MyNYPD. Alright, do you have a photo of the member? Yes, I do. What is this person saying? Maybe featured on post? Alright, do you have, tweet us, tag it, and maybe featured on Facebook. So this, I think, is the NYPD's desire to jump into a medium that they didn't understand. Right? They're trying to control people on Twitter. People on Twitter hate being controlled. Do not tell me what I tweet and why and how I express myself for your public relations BS. What else? Any other thoughts on this for us? Yes.
I think this was like around the time when all the Black Lives Matter and all that stuff was going on, so they were trying to get some good feedback for
Mhm.
NYPD.
And then someone gets the bright idea, hey, hashtag is the way to do it. Alright. Yeah. Alright, we've got another social media company fail. Alright, you may remember when when the thing with Ray Rice, the NFL player who punches his girlfriend in the elevator, originally came out. There was this discussion on social media, and it was hashtag why I stayed, with very moving stories of domestic violence and trying to shed some light on that, give people an opportunity to express why they stayed and shared, let people know they're not alone. Now, someone at DiGiorno's Pizza looked at this and says, hey, this hashtag is trending. Alright, this is what everyone is listening to, this is what everyone is doing, so let's jump on the trending, someone thought they were pretty smart by saying, let's jump on the trending hashtag thing and do this. Let's say, why I stayed, you had a pizza. And maybe we'll sell more DiGiorno pizzas. How do you think that went over? Not good. So, what mistakes did they make in terms of messaging, coding, context, or just lack of understanding? Context, I think, is a key one. They forgot to understand that this why I stayed context is not the context in which you try to sell pizzas, it's which you try to express important social things. It's the lack of understanding, I think, is the key there. Any other comments, any other questions on that? Alright, so I think I want to do now is think about how Dell, this company that successfully used social media, how did they avoid these types of mistakes that DiGiorno made and NYPD made, and how did they infiltrate social media into their culture and use it as an effective business tool? Before we do that, let's take a quick break. What time are we at now? Get official time here. Alright, yeah, so let's come back at 7:40. We'll discuss the Dell case.
They got a vending machine? I doubt it.
No, they do, Here, I got mine. I got it.
of your written essay? No. Take a look when you get a chance. Some points I think could be helpful. Let's go ahead and get started. We're gonna think about how Dell used social media, and what was their secret to using social media so effectively. So let's go through a little profile of the company. Start off, what do we know about Dell? History, what are its strengths, weaknesses, what's going on in general with the company, maybe at the start of the case? Amanda?
Well, they make computers and they were once a public company and then they went private in 2013
Okay.
because they wanted to refocus where they were putting all their, I guess, energy to and not have to try and meet so many targets and focus on the customer.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. All right, when did Dell start? 84? Okay, who started it? Michael Dell? Alright, and he started in his dorm room, right? He's the kind of guy who used to read online blogs back in the 80s. I didn't know they had online blogs back in the 80s. I don't know what he was doing. Sounds like the kind of guy who would start a computer company, right? Alright, do we think of them more as a business to customer company or a business to business?
Customer For at first customer and later on business to business.
Alright, so it started out business to customer and now they're switching of sorts to business to business. Now, how did they initially sell their computers? What was their sales channel, their sales strategy?
Direct sales.
Direct sales. Somebody tell me about direct sales. How'd they do it?
We did it through a website that, you can order the computer directly from them, and they had a partnership with Intel and
Microsoft?
Oh, and they also had a partnership with Sony, so when they sold the computer, it wouldn't have to stay at the warehouse long.
Okay, so they had lots of partnerships. What you're getting at is they're aggregators. Alright, they aggregated from Microsoft, from various companies to put this together. So that's an important part, aggregator. Alright, and also you mentioned direct sales. You can buy through their website. Before they had website, they used to do direct phone sales, right? I remember I talked to a Dell person in 1999 when I was thinking about buying a computer, and we assembled my custom computer. Now, Dell was the company in the late 90s. They were selling stuff very effectively in the early 2000s. They were doing well also. Apple had this very interesting effect on the computing and personal computing industry. Before the 90s, Apple was the rage. Everyone wanted one of those thick MacBooks. And then Apple, had its struggles, had its problems. And then Apple is now the rage again. But in that interim, Dell was the company that was effectively selling and marketing to customers. And they did it through the direct sales, that very personal touch they had with customers. And they did it with this aggregator type of mentality that Letitia mentioned. Alright, and direct sales. What else do we need to know? And we also mentioned the fact that they went private in 2013. Private. Alright, what else do we need to know about just the history of this company and their operating model before we move forward to talk about social media?
Dell started to, the ideal vision was to sell high-end, high processing systems at a lower cost.
Okay, so lower cost directly to the consumers, and now they're switching a little bit business to business. So what sort of social media infrastructure have they built to become successful? Just kind of outline the various social media tools Dell has at their company.
Well, their focus was first like brand identity, and then from there they use social media as an outlet to communicate to the customers.
Okay, fantastic. You're getting into their strategy, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, their key success factors, and we'll come back to that. But just what is the social media infrastructure they have? Smack you?
Yeah, Smack you.
Smack you. Alright, social media, and can you explain that to us, Amanda? What is this?
I don't remember the name.
It trains their employees how to effectively communicate through social media.
Yes, so you go to the Social Media and Communications University,
Yes.
and you are able to then represent Dell online.
Once you get the certificate.
Once you go through their classes and get the certificate.
Right.
And you say, I work for Dell, you be transparent about that, use the hashtag, I work for Dell, and you say, I would recommend this product, or I would recommend this type of program. I would recommend this or that, or this is an advantage, pros, cons, and all the people who are my friends on social media see that I work for Dell, and they lend a little bit more credibility to my voice. So, Smack You, that's infrastructure, what else they have?
Chatter,
Yeah.
What's that?
Chatter.
chatter.
Chatter, what's Chatter? Tell us what Chatter is.
I think it was like a network system between like the employees where they can answer like customers correctly. I think it's that.
Alright, you're testing my memory here.
Salesforce.
Since it's been a minute since I read the entire case, I need to just go back and refresh, but I don't remember Chatter.
It's so that
Yeah.
the employees can communicate with each other.
Employees, okay, so the employees, yes, all right, so the employees have this this intra means of communication called chatter. So we have a culture of using this type of communication at our company. All right, what else? So we've got chatter, we've got smack you. Thank you for reminding me of that. Good one. David?
They have the command center.
Yes, the social media and communications command center. What do they do in the command center?
They're able to look at analytics of how the public is talking about Dell and see if it's positive or negative in real time.
Okay, all right, so not like the NYPD, right? They are able to see what's going on social media and in real time make assessments if it's positive or negative. What else do we have? How about, I'll give you one and maybe you could explain what it is. How about this direct to Dell? Anyone wanna tell us what that is?
That's where they publish the events, the products, and what's the other one? The company news.
Is it, I think you may be thinking of IdeaStorm? IdeaStorm.
Yeah.
That was for the customers, right? Yes, one. So,
IdeaStorm and then, Tech Page One. All right, I'll just
Tech
give it, all
Page
right. So
One.
there's IdeaStorm and then there's Tech Page One. Tech Page One. Okay, so let's talk about those three. What is Tech Page One? Do you want to take this, Denosa? I think it's what you were describing earlier, where there's a lot of different products on this, it's a blog of different computer projects, different software products, and they've created this blog where it's not just to sell Dell stuff. A small percentage of it is Dell stuff, but a limited amount is of Dell stuff. So they created a blog where they would be a trusted source of understanding what's out there in terms of computer and software, computer hardware and software. All right, so that's Tech Page One. What's back to Direct to Dell? What is Direct to Dell? Well, it's like it sounds. You want to go direct to Dell, you get on that Direct to Dell website or Direct to Dell portal, and you can talk to someone directly. You can connect, you can get your questions answered, you can get your complaints responded to. And this became the primary method of customers communicating with Dell. They were built on a direct to customer phone model, and then they became a direct to customer via website model. And then IdeaStorm, that's the last one, what is that? Or that?
It's where customers can suggest features for computers or any ideas.
Yes, absolutely. So we've got feature suggestions, we've got a way you can get direct to Dell, and we've got a blog that has become a trusted source of content for hardware and software. And this is all managed in this social media and communications command center. And that command center also trains employees to be our ambassadors online. And we have a culture with this chatter program of using this type of messaging to stay abreast of important things. So that's a little bit of the history of Dell. Let's talk about how successful they've been via using social media and how they've done it. First question though, let's establish success. Has Dell been successful at using social media?
Yes.
Yes. How do we know they've been successful? What metrics do we have?
Well,
NPS.
What?
NPS.
What's NPS?
I think it's like the customer base satisfaction.
Okay, Amanda, you were gonna.
I was gonna say they were like pretty much like the pioneers of it because it shows that they've been doing it for years and that companies go to their facility to watch them and to piggyback
Yes.
off of.
Yes,
what
they have the
do.
reputation as industry leaders. And what else? You're gonna, what's NPS?
It's a Net Promoter Score.
Oh, okay, a Net Promoter Score, yes. So they have a good Net Promoter Score. Can you tell us a little more about that, David?
Yeah, so I guess the first year that well, it's a metric that they look at customer retention and how satisfied they are. And I guess the first year they started going to social media, they saw a 59% increase, and the second year was 39%.
Okay, so they've got a scorecard, alright, which says they have used social media effectively. I think the case also boasts about less employee turnover, more efficient employees. They also say, although they don't give any direct evidence or explanation of this, that they can point to which Twitter posts actually increase sales. They can link a Twitter post and say that increased sales and this is why. So they seem to have some evidence that they have been effective with social media, in addition to the fact that everyone goes to their company for training. So they've had success. Let's talk about why. Why has Dell been able to be successful when other companies, maybe not so much? We give the extreme example of the NYPD, but there are other companies that just haven't embraced and been successfully using social media. And let me break this down. Let's think about this in terms of Dell's culture. One, how's that a success factor? Let's think about the strategy they used. Strategy. And then let's think about how they executed that strategy. Execution. Okay, Orlando. What are their key success factors?
Key to success was other companies were afraid of like the backlash of social media, and Dell was like in forefront, and they like kind of embraced it, and then they just used it to bring up a lot of profits.
Yes, okay.
And then also another thing they would do is they'll tweet products, and they mentioned just by tweeting the products they made over 50 million.
Okay,
So
yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Just by tweeting the product, yeah. Yeah, fantastic. What are the factors in terms of the culture at Dell allowed them to be successful, or how they defined their strategy, or how they executed that strategy? Let's talk about culture first. What in the Dell culture allowed this embracing attitude with social media?
They allowed people to speak freely, like, because they trusted them, like, in what they would say after they got that certificate, they felt like they would be able to represent their company well.
Okay, so they trusted their employees to speak. Fantastic. So trust. All right, trust. So they're also a culture built on this direct to customer model. So it used to be via phone, and they said that's our culture. We have real people talking to customers about their needs. That's the way we've always done it. Why would we not want to do it via social media? So they're direct to customer. Is another factor, direct to customer. Let's remember we said Michael Dell started this company in his dorm room after he was looking at online blogs in the 1980s. So we had a culture starting with our CEO that embraced that kind of technology. CEO. All right. So trust, direct to customer. We've got the CEO.
Oh, they were big in two-way communication.
Quick response.
Oh, okay, big in, you mean like with chatter? Stuff?
No, just using social media, like if it doesn't matter what kind of platform it was, they'll use it. So I was like, I guess it's something in their culture. They wasn't afraid to, like, they went from Twitter then like Instagram into different types of platforms just to communicate.
So maybe use any two-way communication. All right, so I'm gonna put that under execution. Any two-way comms. All right, any two-way comms. All right. How about their strategy? What was their? How did they decide their strategy? How was that a key success factor in their effective use of social media?
Loyalty,
What's that?
customer loyalty.
Oh, okay. So we want to capitalize on customer loyalty. So how did they capitalize on customer loyalty in terms of their strategy?
I think they provided a unified,
one second.
Okay, they monitoring the trends in the internet and also trends of potential R&D benefits. R&D means research and rollout,
Okay.
and to also increase the customer loyalty.
But let's stay with loyalty. All right. How are they going to turn that into a strategy for business-wise? So loyalty. You've got customers who really love you.
Yeah.
Alright, so what are we gonna do with those people if we use social media?
People advertising your company to
Yeah,
their
but
friends.
how are we gonna help them advertise our company?
They can solve the problem quickly on social media. I mean, you quick
Okay.
response.
Okay, yes, so they solve the problem quickly, so that's a business aspect. But in terms of what I'm getting at in terms of loyalty is if you've got people who are loyal to your company, let's make our strategy be to give those people a voice. Alright, to give those people a chance to rave about us on social media and tweet it and retweet it. Alright, we're gonna build our brand with those people on social media. Alright, that's what I'm getting at in terms of one part of their strategy. Let's build our brand. Build brand via social media. And then the other thing that Yoke mentioned, alright, we want to solve problems via social media. And we want to solve business, we're gonna have a business strategy. So not only do we wanna build our brand with social media, we also want to sell computers and solve business problems via social media. Orlando.
They broke down, like, as for Twitter, whatever problem they had, they broke it down, so they had like tech problem, they had support problems, so every department was different, so that's another strategy they used. So if you're in tech, you wouldn't respond to to the sales team, so they broke down every department differently.
Okay, explain it, flesh it out a
Yeah,
little.
they mentioned that, what they did was they broke it down to sales team, tech support, and customer sales. So what they did was, if you're tweeting and you wrote about, oh, I don't understand how to use this computer, you get the support team. If
Okay.
you're interested in buying a Dell, you get the sales team. Then
Yes.
they broke it down and, like, every department will respond individually.
Yeah, well, they broke it down to do exactly the way you're describing, but what was it like before the Social Media and Communications Command Center decided on that strategy? So Orlando's pointing out the strategy that depending on what you tweet or what you complain or what you rave about, a different department is going to respond to you, right?
Yeah.
Well, what was it like before the Social Media and Communications Center, put that strategy together? What did they do before that?
They disregarded any bad feedback.
But again, so that's one thing, they just disregarded
They
it?
didn't address
Or they had apparently dozens of different departments responding. Alright, instead of one department managing everything and subdividing the type of communication they're having. There are apparently dozens of different departments, different product lines, hundreds of different pages, if you add them all up, all the Facebook pages, all the Twitter pages they had. So the Social Media and Communications culled them down into one page for Facebook, one page for Twitter. And as Orlando is describing, they had a clear strategy of how they're going to address complaints or address problems. So, two key points in strategy. One, they said, let's use social media to build our brand. Let's not, as Maxine pointed out, just ignore negative stuff. Let's build our brand. Two, let's use this as a business tool. Tell me about that. How did they make money with social media or save money with social media? Man.
Well, they saved money off of the phone systems because they said that the phone systems were an expensive medium to speak to the customers, so this was actually less expensive, so.
Yeah, alright, saving money. If we can solve problems, we save money that way. How else did they make money? Social media. Or did they just do social media because they want to be hip and cool? No, they wanted to make money as well.
And lower cost.
Lower cost? Yes, fantastic. Lower cost, what else? Amanda?
They created brand awareness to customers, they reached different customers, so it showed in one of the graphs that the employees alone reached like 300,000 customers, and it was only an overlap of like 40,000, so they reached like a whole new platform of customers that brought more people in.
They created
Expensive.
customer awareness by letting their employees use the internet freely and certifying them to talk to whoever they wanted. And we mentioned SmackU earlier. Does anyone remember how many employees at Dell went through the SmackU certification? How much?
17,000.
17,000, all right, so we've got 17,000 customers reaching out to hundreds of thousands of people, creating brand awareness. And we've got them doing it on things like Tech Page One, where we are we created a blog where we're trusted and we're transparent. We use this I work for Dell. Let's talk about that a minute. Every time an employee talks about Dell products, they use the hashtag I work for Dell. What do we think about that? Is that a good idea? Is that going to send the wrong message? How does that play into this case? Manisha, what do you think? Do we want to be transparent like that?
I mean, it's always good to be straightforward.
Okay,
Like
okay.
that.
Amanda?
I think it's good because it's not tricking the customer
Yeah.
into thinking that you're not someone that works for Dell and you're just raving about it, so now you actually know they work for Dell and they're just trying to help you in the situation instead of just like tricking you.
Okay, so if you found out later, you'd be like, oh, I got tricked
Yeah.
by someone who actually worked for Dell. But what if you don't ever find out? I don't know, like Venetia said, I think it's good to be straightforward. The company also felt it was good to be straightforward. And they have so many ambassadors for their company, they legitimately create buzz. Real buzz. Right? They got 17,000 people tweeting about their stuff, talking about their stuff, responding to stuff. And if you're connected with that person on social media, you're like, oh, I know that person. I met him at a networking event 2 years ago or whatever. We did LinkedIn, we did Twitter, whatever. Alright, so we create a legitimate buzz, even with this I work for Dell hashtag. Alright, that gets some trend to it. And imagine that. A disclaimer, alright, that becomes a buzzword on the internet. Hashtag I work for Dell.
Save money on marketing.
Yes.
Save money. 'Cause I remember you used to see a whole lot of commercials for Dell and magazines and all that other stuff. Now you don't really see it. If you're online, that's pretty much what the medium is like.
Yes, absolutely. So we've got free advertising. Alright, so brand and business key success factors. In terms of their execution, they wanted all these folks using social media. We've got 17K people, 17K buzz. Now, Dell was a company that said, feel free to use social media while you're at work. What do y'all think about that? Does that make good business sense? Bad business sense? Does your company say the same thing? Do you wish they did?
It can go both ways. Where I work now, they cut off my internet, so it's like.
Okay, so they actually
But-
cut off your internet.
Yeah.
Oh, they block the sites.
Mm-hmm.
They block Facebook. Alright, instead of like Dell, where they say feel free to talk as much as you want on social media. So, what do you think? It obviously worked for Dell, but the companies you go out and work for, they probably aren't going to be Dell. But the companies you decide to create and manage, they may not be Dell either. So you're going to have to make this decision. And this is one example of how it worked well. But in what cases do you think it works well? In what cases do you think it doesn't work well?
I mean, they established that culture within that company. So if you have that level of trust, you know that somebody's not gonna look up, I don't know, an X-rated site just because you allow them to be free to do whatever they want.
Well, they could. I mean, they could.
But you're trusting them enough. You create that environment. Well, like here, we're trusting you with this. We know that you will try to do the right thing.
Okay, yeah, I like that. So we're trusting you. We're in a culture where we value the business value of social media. Because social media has two important points to our business strategy. One, we can use it to build our brand. Two, we can use it to sell things. So maybe there's going to be some wasted time when you're messaging your friends on Facebook about some party that they invited to you later that night. But on the whole, it seems to have worked very well for Dell. In terms of the way they executed, they embraced any of these two-way communications, and they used all of these things we talked about. Direct to Dell, Tech Page One, Idea Storm, and the Smack U University, which trained everyone. So they were successful for a variety of reasons. What I want to talk about next is this statistic that was mentioned in the case, where the writers of the case said that Dell claims that a social media lead is 2 to 5 times more likely to close than a traditional lead. And first of all, what does that mean, to close? I was teaching. Yeah, to get the sale. So if they get a lead on social media, the chances of that becoming a sale, where they sell a computer or something else, 2 to 5 times more likely than another traditional type of lead. Why is that? Why are these leads on social media going to be 2 to 5 times more valuable? Patricia?
It's a little more informal. I don't know, like the customer feels like.
Okay, informal, all right, well maybe you can chew on that one as we talk about some other things. We'll come back to it. So why is this lead going to be more valuable?
Because I feel like they're getting all of their questions asked at that very moment. It's very customizable to them. So it's like, whatever you need, I'm gonna answer it right now. And whatever design you need, I can pull that together, like, it's customizable. I don't know.
Okay, yes, just to be devil's advocate though, they could have done the same thing on the phone, right?
Yeah, but I feel like you're kind of speaking to somebody. This phone is like,
Phone is like you're not speaking to
hang up on
someone?
them. No, but you can hang up on them. I feel like you kind of see, in social media, you kind of see what they look like. It's kind of like, it's like almost as if you're really speaking to them.
It's
In person.
informal. It's like a friendship kind of, like, I understand you.
It's not a
Yeah.
sales pitch.
Yeah, I like that, friendship, all right? So let me start with that and then come back to some other things. So friends, it's like a friendship, but also it is a friendship, right? Because there's maybe one of the 17,000 people who works for Dell that's giving you some trusted information on this. So it's a friend on social media has referred you to Dell. I mean, and imagine that, a company that just has no idea about social media, and they think, well, how can we sell more stuff? And somebody gets the idea, well, how about I bring in some of my friends on social media? And the CEO might say, oh, of course, social media, that's the way to go. I want all your friends on social media to come in. I want you to post this on Facebook, say how great we are. But Dell does that naturally. Dell says, fine, use Facebook. It's part of our brand strategy, part of our business strategy. Use Facebook as much as you want. I don't care if you're looking at the party that you're going to the next night, every once in a while. But just use Facebook, because you have really friend-like and actual friends. And I think Amanda was maybe getting at a little bit of that too. It's the friend-like quality. Anything else? Why else would, any other comments on why social media would be 2 to 5 times more likely? Yes?
If you contact them through social media, you've already did your research, so you're maybe twice as likely to actually buy something.
Yes. So you contact them, you've done research, you have access to all this research that Dell has helped facilitate. And to your point, that these are customer-initiated contacts. And the people who they connect with on social media, the customer logged on to their website, all their stuff that they created. And I think that we can credit the company with all the resources they created that got someone who was trolling social media to say, I'm interested in this. And so that customer initiative and the friend quality, I think, is key to making these sales more likely to close. So let's look last at the next steps. Now we mentioned that Dell has primarily in the past been a business to customer model where they sell computers to individuals, and they're transitioning to more of a business to business model. Can someone tell us a little bit about that? What are they trying to do in terms of, currently actually, right, they're in the middle of
They're
this.
trying to go more with problem solving,
Okay, problem solving, what do you mean by that?
I guess,
Problem solving for who?
for businesses.
Yes, so big problems for business in terms of how they're handling cloud computing, how they're setting up their whole network, how they're buying huge amounts of computers to solve problems. Because you look at us as someone who's gonna come and solve your problems for you from a technology standpoint, rather than just selling you a few computers. Is something to add to that, Maxine? Okay. All right, so they're trying to become more of a business-to-business brand. Now, when you think of Dell, what do you think of? Do you think of them as a business-to-business brand, or do you have other, just even before you read the case, what was your opinion of Dell? Was it I think of them as business-to-business, or I think of them as business-to-consumer?
Business to
Business
consumer.
consumer.
Business to consumer, like what were some of the things that you knew about Dell before this case that made you think that way?
Customized programming on your computer.
Customized for me, for the individual, alright, I remember the direct sales model. Orlando, what made you think of Dell as a business to consumer company before you read this case?
Just, like, I don't know, I guess, all, you know, I don't say, just always thought it was, just, I used to work in PC Richards, right, I used to do sales.
Okay, is that
And then-
computer, this computer?
Yeah, well, we saw everything, kinda like Best Buy.
Okay,
Yeah,
Okay.
so people would come in and, you know, they wanted their products and would tell them, you know, if you wanna upgrade anything on the computer, you can just call them directly.
okay,
So that's kind of why
okay.
I felt.
Alright, and you had the edge on most people because you actually worked in the computer store. Alright, so we think of Dell as more of a business to consumer company, but they want to be, as Letitia mentioned, a problem solving for large business company. They want to be a business to business company. How can Dell change that mindset? And where go ahead, Maxine.
I mean, I think they already have, a lot of businesses right now are using Dell servers, Dell switches,
Do we have Dell?
network switches.
Yep.
Oh yeah, we have Dell. Yeah, we've got Dell.
Right, because of the cost, but their processing power is really strong. If you wanna upgrade, the price is cheap. So they're already out there, I mean, they're not as strategic as maybe an EMC and IBM where they can hold a lot of data, large devices hold a lot of data. So they're still trailing behind in that area. I think they're gonna be competitive with those
Oh,
guys.
say that again, tell us.
IBM
Sure.
and EMC,
But they're trailing behind in what aspect?
as far as providing SAN solutions.
Saying what?
SAN solutions, storage area network solutions.
Okay, so can you educate me? or
Storage
educate us a
area,
little?
okay, so IBM and EMC is largely known for providing SAN environments. And what that is where you have all your data in a large device filled with 50 to 100 even more hard disks. And when servers are accessing or users are accessing your desktop, it's not really going to your desktop, it's going to that large SAN device. where you
So if like
send
at
back and forth
Mercy,
data.
if Mercy College had one of those, it would be like a room with a bunch of
I'm
computers?
sure they do.
Okay, so they've got
It's in a
one.
data center.
Alright, so Dell sold Mercy College one of those, that system perhaps,
Dell,
no?
as far as the SAN device, I doubt it. That's what I'm saying, that's where they're trailing behind in.
Okay, so someone else besides Dell. Dell probably did sell us the computers because they're Dell computers.
Yeah.
But there's someone else who has a better capability on the SANs.
Yes.
Okay.
Storing large amount of data.
Okay, so they and the initial thing you said is they already have started to change that brand awareness to more of a business to business. Okay, how have they used social media to start that transition, and how are they using social media to continue that transition? Amanda.
They said because they're offering advice on products and services, it'll be a better use to companies to solve their problems.
Because they've positioned themselves as the kind of the problem-solving company. Okay, fair enough. What else? Anything else?
They started the tech page, the
tech
blog.
page,
So
yes.
that's a lot of people refer to that. as to fix their computers.
Okay, a lot of people refer to that. So, yes, and what I'm getting at is there's a point in the case where it mentions that a lot of employees of companies that Dell is trying to sell to already use Direct to Dell, already use TechPage One. And they can actually show these companies who may make a very large purchase of hardware that, look, all these Mercy employees are already coming to us because we're a trusted source on content, and they're already coming to us to help them solve their computing problems. So, one, you can save money because your employees already know where to come if they have a problem, and two, you can feel better about making this huge purchase, and this huge investment of a commercial computer space, or for commercial computers, because your employees already have that kind of confidence in us. So, how does this whole privatization event figure into their Dell's strategy or Dell's desire to rebrand themselves as more of a business-to-business company? How does the fact that they went through a recent privatization affect that or add to that? Venetia?
I think it worked out for them. They don't have to worry about the standards of Wall Street. They would have actually lost more money having to rebrand themselves being a public company, because that'd be very difficult, and then having to focus on numbers instead of focusing on who gives them the numbers.
Yes. So it gives them more flexibility. They can go back to their culture and say, all right, we're gonna take a breath. We're gonna remember our roots. We're gonna remember that we allow employees to use social media freely, and we're not gonna have a manager saying, get off social media, we need to make money for the next quarter. All right, privatization. Any other thoughts on how they can rebrand themselves and or use social media to rebrand themselves? All right, I want to conclude by looking at, you remember I pulled up that slide about inappropriate messages. And I said, I don't think there's really such a thing as an inappropriate message. I think there are just inappropriate mediums, inappropriate senders, inappropriate context. Now I want to go back to that slide, and I just want to go through a process of thinking about how has Dell made sure that they are appropriate with all their efforts on social media. So let's think about how and when and why Dell might have chosen the appropriate medium to, one, sell more computers, two, rebrand themselves, or build brand loyalty. How have they used the appropriate medium? Or is this the appropriate medium? We just spend half an hour talking about something and now you want to tell me, wait, no, social media was not the appropriate medium to do that. There's nothing new here. I just want to summarize some of the stuff we've been talking about. That do we think that they chose an appropriate medium to do those two things, drive business and build business loyalty?
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. How about their choice of senders? The choice of messengers?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. They've got friends of yours on social media. Those are the people delivering that message to you. Coding. All right. This is, I guess we could split hairs about how we define that, but coding. How might we look at that and say whether or not Dell was successful? Coding. What kind of coding do they have? I guess they have that hashtag I work for Dell. That's an example of a code, and an example of a code where you mentioned they used it so frequently it becomes this buzzword, like, oh, I work for Dell. A lot of people work for Dell and are excited about working for Dell, and they're friends of mine on social media. Coding. I suppose there could also be some coding things that happen on TechPage One in terms of how people talk about computer hardware, computer software. Context. Alright, so we've created a context. I don't know exactly how we would think about that. Somebody help me out here. How is Dell, Amanda?
well, they created different, mediums, like the chatter and stuff, so it's like context directly related to that specific thing.
Yes,
not having-
I like it, I like it. So we've got the chatter as the appropriate context in which employees can interact. And we've got direct to Dell, all right? So you go direct, you want to hear directly from Dell about a problem that you're having. When the representative responds to you, they're not gonna say, hey, let's talk about this or that tech page one idea. They're gonna say, no, how may I help you? All right, they've created the right context. Similarly, if you're on tech page one and you're interfacing with someone, they're gonna say, oh yeah, how about this neat little thing that happened? Or if you're on the idea storm, which we only talked about briefly, where customers can give ideas about products, you can say this is the appropriate context to say, hey, how do you like that new keyboard? Or how do you like this feature or that feature? And if you mix those up, there could be some problems, but they've created so many different ways to create the right context. And then confusing noise, hopefully they've figured out a way to be effective. I think a company that just tried to jump into social media may face a lot of confusing noise at the beginning when they don't realize how hashtag works, or they don't realize how, you tag all these people on Facebook, and that just creates this big thing that leaves a different impression than you meant. Just by understanding the medium of social media, I feel like they may have eliminated some confusing noise. So, I thought this was a great example of a company that used social media for an effective business purpose, and also allowed us to think about how they effectively got the message right. Alright, so next week, we've got some discussion on career development. I've got a couple of resumes from you so far. I will, remember we're gonna have someone come in next week who works for Aetna. She works in talent development for several years, and before that she worked at IBM in talent development. So she's got a lot of experience, and she's gonna tell us a little bit about her perspective on interviews, resumes, and networking. And then I'm going to pick up with a little bit of networking discussion. And I mentioned she offered to look at your resumes to start off her discussion that way. And so if you haven't sent me your resume, please send me your resume. But I will, to entice you to do that, I will actually send out a reminder which you can just reply to and attach your resume. So there's that. And we might even I might even send out an invite to some other MBA students and try to open this event up to some other MBAs who want to come and sit in on our class, although I talked to some people in career services and they don't think anyone's actually going to come out to the Bronx, because you are the only business students ever who come out in the Bronx this particular quarter. But that might happen, so be prepared, and I guess be hopeful that there might be a couple new faces just sitting in on this class with us. We talked about your corporate change memo, which is due in 2 weeks, and what I've asked you to do for next week is a write-up summary of the Dell case, just explaining, what did I say? Does someone have the syllabus in front of them? What are the instructions for next week? For the Dell case summary. Okay, please use the thesis and subheading framework discussed in class to explain how Dell made effective use of social media to drive business results. So I want you to take another shot at that thesis and subheading format. I have everyone's original written conclusion graded. So if you did not get a 10 out of 10 on that first paper, please look very carefully at the comments and the feedback I gave you. I think that is an effective way to present a clear idea, and it's based on some fairly strict structures. And it's pretty easy for me to look at your paper and explain how you may or may not have fit into that structure. And you're going to do the exact same thing in terms of following that structure for the Dell case summary. And I think there's one other assignment, emotional intelligence summary, which is going to be due later in the quarter, where you'll do the exact same format. So take a look at your feedback from the written summary, written conclusion, and use that to inform you of how you're going to use that thesis subheading framework to explain how Dell made effective use of social media. Do not attempt to explain how Dell could use social media in the future, rather just summarize what the company had to accomplish at the time the case was written. Just all the stuff we talked about. It's just a matter of putting it into a clear thesis with a few subheadings, and gets back to what I think is an important value statement for MBAs. How you can take something which contains a lot of parts, a lot of different subjects, and condense it down to this is the important takeaway. Okay, that's all I got. I will see you all next week. Yeah, David pointed out, I asked you to read a short article preparing for the networking thing and think about constructing an elevator pitch, which is described in the article. Just, and we talked about elevator pitch, right? Does everyone remember what an elevator pitch is? Alright, this is who I am, this is what I have to offer professionally, this is how we should follow up. So I've asked you just to read a one-page article that I've written and think about preparing your own elevator pitch.